Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first official meeting of the Montana Geospatial Information Advisory Council. It feels a little strange to say the first meeting because many of us have been meeting under the auspices of the Land Information Advisory Council for many years. So it's great that we were able to go through a process of updating some of the legislation that governs the work of our GIS coordination, the duties of the state library, and the makeup and duties of this council over the 2023 legislative session. It's something that we needed to do for a long time. Some of the requirements in statute were no longer necessary, and then there were some challenges with the makeup of the council and the terms of the council that made some of our work more challenging. So as many of you know, we went through that process in 2023, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the steps that have come from that. But as a result, we have a newly formed council with some new members and some returning members. We're really grateful to the people who've returned. And those of you who have joined us, I want to start by doing introductions. And also I want to say that Aaron and I really do view this time as a reforming of the council. And so we're going to spend some time over the next several meetings making sure that administratively and organizationally we're satisfied with how we want to move forward in conducting our business. So we'll talk more throughout the meeting about what some of those changes might look like and where we need the support of the council. But because we do have new people with us, I do want to take the time to go ahead and introduce the council. And for those of you who have been on the council, remember that we do have new members that might not know you. So if you would just say a little bit more about who you are, your background, and the work that you bring, I'm going to go ahead and call on members of the council and ask you to introduce yourselves. So I'll start. I am Jenny Stapp. I am the Montana State Librarian. I have worked for the State Library since 2005, and I've been the State Librarian since 2012. I have been attending and participating in these council meetings since about 2009, 2010, and been chairing the council since 2012. And I think it's a really an honor and a privilege to know that the state's GIS coordination and data administration is under the authority of the state library. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we do some orientation later in the work session. But really glad to be a part of this important council. Lee, I'll ask you to introduce yourself.
That's on. My name is Lee Mackholtz. I am the GIS manager for the city of Missoula. I've been in that role for about 5 years now. Been a member of the MAGIP and the GIS community, professional community in the state for about 21 years. So I bring a lot of depth and breadth to the council and really that I'm a local government representative, so that city and municipal perspective. And I think this is my third, maybe fourth term. I can't remember. It's been a while. I think it's my third term. So yeah, I'm excited to keep working. I've been working with the strategic component with Aaron and Jenny for several years. So that's been one of my focuses for the last term on the council. Thanks.
Great. Valentine?
Good morning. I'm Valentine Hoff. I represent the Montana University System. I work at the University of Montana, Missoula at the College of Forestry. I'm the program manager in the fire center there, so we do a lot of fire-related research, and we use a lot of GIS data and remote sensing data. And I think this is my fourth term on the council, so glad to be here.
Eric.
Good morning. I'm Eric Spangenberg. I'm with Lewis and Clark County City of Helena GIS. I believe my representation on the advisory council is as the Montana GIS professional. I've been a member of that organization 26 years. I started I started in Montana GIS up in Cascade County. Like I said, I've been here in Montana 26 years. I've been doing GIS for a little over 30 years. And I come in with a local government perspective, but I'm also representing the GIS professionals in this advisory council. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. I'm going to turn to some of our council members that are online. Alan Armstrong, if you'd introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, good morning, everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I was planning to attend, but my dermatologist has me on some preventative skincare treatment. And so I look more hideous than I normally do. And I just, it's a little uncomfortable. So I thought, well, I better just stay home this time. So anyhow, happy to be here online. I represent the Bureau of Land Management here in Montana, the Montana State Office. We are an office that manages Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota. I've been in this position since 2018. I've been working in GIS in Montana since 1991. Prior to being with the BLM, I was in Gallatin County for 18 years as the GIS manager there. And the management role at the federal level is a little bit different. I'd say since 2018, we just this year finally got ourselves organized to the point where I should have been in 2018. So we are a big ship. It moves very slow, but I'm here to represent the federal perspective. This is I can't remember how many times I've been on the council, but happy to be part and really enjoy working with this group.
Thank you, Alan. Next, I'm going to call on Maureen. Maureen is one of our new members to the council.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Maureen Sealander. I am the GIS manager in Custer County, Montana. We're the southeastern perspective for local government on the council, and I'm looking forward to serving with all of you and helping in any capacity I can.
Thanks, Maureen. We're really glad you could be with us.
Thank you.
And Brian DeMarco.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Hi, I'm Brian DeMarco, General Manager for SAI Communications. We're a telecommunications company operating on the Blackfeet Reservation. I've worked in telecom for about 30 years now and excited to be involved and look forward to getting to know everybody and serving. So thank you.
Thank you. Glad you could be with us. And Karen, hello, Karen. Happy New Year. Karen is sitting in for Brian Collins from DNRC. If you would introduce yourself.
Hi. Yeah, good. Nice to be here. I too was going to attend in person, but decided to keep my coughing and sneezing to myself. And I'm Karen Coleman, and I'm a GIS analyst at the DNRC. And as Jenny said, sitting in for Brian Collins, who's program manager at GIS program manager at DNRC, representing state government on the council. I've been doing GIS in Montana since 2004, and this is my first ever council meeting. Well, I guess it's everyone's first because it's new council, but it's even previous council. I've never been to one, so I'm excited to attend. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And let's see, I don't see Adam Carpenter. Adam represents the Department of Administration for the state of Montana. I think that is all the council members that are present. So Erin, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Erin Fashway. I am the state GIS coordinator and I staff the council.
And Genevieve.
Genevieve Lighthizer. I'm the admin specialist with the Montana State Library.
Okay. And then we have a number of other staff and guests. I'll start in the room. Mike, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Mike Powell. I'm the past president of MEGA. We work very closely with MGIA-C. And I guess I got a quick question, just personal. Is there a C at the end? Or is it
council.
For
And-
council, so
yep.
there is a C at the end.
Yep.
So we just changed the G and the L. Okay, I just want
There
to
we
make
go.
sure I got that straight, so. Yeah, I've been doing GIS for, I'm the GIS manager for Yellowstone County. I've been doing that for over 20 years and I've been working in GIS over 30 years prior. Well, not prior, but over 30 years, so
Great.
thank you.
Thanks for attending. And Michael Fashaway.
Good morning, everyone. Michael Fashaway, GIS Land Information Lead at the Montana State Library. Never been on the council, but I've been active in Montana GIS since 2004.
Great. Gail, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. I'm Gail Jorgensen. I am the acting vice president of MAGIP, and I'm happy to be able to be here. I won't be able to be here for the full time, but as much as I can. Good luck with your new council.
Thanks, Gail. And Jeff Sprock.
Good morning, everyone. Jeff Sprock, the president of the Montana Association of Geographic Information Professionals, our geospatial information professionals. Excited to give an update this morning on what MAGIP is doing. And I was the GIS coordinator for the city of Billings. I've been promoted to the IT manager there and have been involved with GIS since about 2001.
Great. And then we have a number of state library staff who are also online. Evan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Evan Hammer, Digital Library Administrator at the State Library. I've been doing GIS with the state since about 2006, a couple of years at the NRC before coming to the library, and had a few different roles here. Digital Library is where GIS program is housed at the State Library, although kind of as Jenny mentioned, and as you can imagine from her being the chair, it is part of everything we do. So thanks.
Thanks. And let's go to Jeff Hedstrom.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff Hedstrom, GIS analyst for the State Library, and also served on the board a couple times. So just here to listen. I've been involved in GIS since 2012.
Thanks, Jeff. And Troy?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to the council. My name is Troy Blanford. I'm the water information lead at the State Library. Started my career in GIS in 2006 with the DNRC. Spent about 7 years there and then transitioned over to the library. Been here the last 10 years or so. I lead our hydrography theme and also elevation LIDAR and drought amongst other water information. Thanks.
Thanks, Troy. And Kazi.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kazi Arifuzaman. I am RTN coordinator at MSL. Our state RTN name is Montana State Reference Network. This service provides you real-time GPS or GNSS coordinates for any of your public works. Thank you.
Thanks, Kazi. The staff that we've introduced are staff that you will hear from through regular updates and reports to the council. They manage a variety of initiatives, and the council always provides important feedback to the work that they are leading. So glad that they could be a part of it. I wanted to mention that we do have 2 open seats on the council. One is the representative for the registered land surveyors. Dan Staley had been reappointed to that position under the new council, and then he was stolen to work on a different council. So we're sorry to lose him, but know that he will continue to be a great supporter of ours. We're working to fill that position. And then the private business representative position, we've provided some names and some feedback to the lieutenant governor, and looking forward to the governor's office filling those 2 positions. And then that will round out the makeup of the council. Just sort of at a very high level for the new council members, the role of this council is really to provide guidance to the state library on 2 related and very integral roles to our work. One is to ensure that we are developing data that meets the information needs of Montanans. And we do that work by helping to identify what kinds of data should be collected and the standards through which we can ensure that that data is collected and made accessible most efficiently and meeting the needs of our users. And then secondly, and certainly as important is the GIS coordination work that we do. We at the State Library recognize that we will not be successful in ensuring that we're meeting our users' needs if we are not working in partnership with those people who use that data, both in terms of the data contributors, the data developers, the data managers, as well as the people who use GIS to help inform the decisions that we're making. And so that's why this kind of representative model for the council is so important to us. And we'll talk about this a little bit more later in the agenda. If you weren't familiar with the previous council, we've gone from more than 20 members to just about 11 members. So we've reduced the size by half. And there's some benefits and drawbacks to that. One of the requirements that it puts on all of us is that we be in communication with those whom we are representing to make sure that people still have a voice and an opportunity to help contribute to how we are going about developing and providing access to the data and the kinds of partnerships and strategic coordination we need to provide to make sure that people are actually then making use of the data that we make available. So we at the State Library very much value the work of you as our advisory council. We take this role very seriously. And we're just really grateful for you and your commitment to be involved in the process. Before we start diving into the agenda, do any of you have any questions for me, burning questions? All right. Well, hearing none, we do have an executive summary from your June meeting in your meeting materials. Because this is a brand new council, because some of you were not involved in that work, we're not going to ask you to take action on that executive summary, but we did want to provide it for sort of continuity and for your future reference and for anyone else who maybe new to the council or not as familiar with the work of the council. The notes are there, and we also make all of our past meeting materials available in an archive. So that will sort of provide a bridge from the work of the previous council to this newly made up council. Are there other administrative updates you want to make sure we cover?
Yes. I have an error on the agenda because I wasn't sure who was presenting and I switched it. So Jeff Sprock is the president of MAGIP. And I know, Mike, you're here. But I don't know if you guys are going to tag team the update. I know Jeff said he would. Okay. Yeah. I just wanted to make that update.
Okay.
My apologies.
Thanks, Erin.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and move into that update from MAGIP. And again, for new council members, MAGIP being the professional association with which we work, it's always important for this council to take into account their perspective and their work to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to coordinate with one another. So Jeff, thanks.
Well, good morning again, everyone. And yeah, that's exactly right. The Montana Association of Geospatial Information Professionals represents hundreds of geospatial professionals across the state of Montana. And we are really excited to be involved with the inaugural meeting of the MGIAC. I know it's kind of a continuation of other efforts, but understanding that there are new board members as well. There's just been a lot of great work between the two organizations in the past, and we're you can see from the representation here, we've got Gail, the oncoming president, you've got Mike, the past president, and myself, the current president, here because we know how important this organization is, and we're really excited to be engaged and collaborating with you. So just to provide a kind of an update on what MAGIP has been doing over the last 6 months, one of the big things that Mike Powell has been doing, leading a subcommittee on reformatting MAGIP's website. We have over a decade's worth of information stored on our website, and just lots and lots of information, and some changes have happened. So Mike, along with his subcommittee, have been working very hard to go through the different pages on the website and are making incremental changes to that. And so that's been a big thing that the group has been working on in the last 6 months. Also, we did something a little bit different with GIS Day this year. They've done, MAGIP has done mapathons in the past, but in the last couple of years, it's just been mostly meetups. This year, we went big based on an idea from Gail and others on the board, Hillary and others. We went ahead with a mapathon, not really competition, but there were sites across the state of Montana, from Billings to Bozeman to Helena to Missoula, and people just participating online all across the state, mapping power lines across the state, and trying to involve GIS professionals, students, and many other people in understanding GIS and actually getting their hands dirty digitizing, heads up digitizing power lines across the state. We're excited from the results of that, and we're going to open up that data to GIS professionals across the state in a contest for some sort of either paper map or mapping application using that data to kind of showcase the work that was done on GIS Day. Other things that we've been doing, we recently purchased ArcGIS Online for the organization. We had a free version of it that kind of expired and went away. So we've been using ArcGIS Online, or will be using ArcGIS Online to showcase maps across the state, use it as a map gallery, and to take advantage of the Survey 123 capabilities. So that's a big step, and Gail and Hillary and others have been doing really great things with the mapathon already on that, and just expect more things to come. Just wanted to talk a little bit about discussion on the Montana administrative rule amendments. We were asked to provide information on that. The board did review that, and just would like, maybe as part of the discussion today, like a little bit more understanding on administrative rules. We weren't comfortable in replying to that, but we had supported the legislation that were behind those rule changes, and we expressed that our members should go out and if they felt so moved to provide feedback in that way. And then the last thing, when it comes to just overview on the last 6 months, I just want to continue to just thank Andrew Stickney and his predecessors for running the local government SIG. We have a local government SIG that meets, I want to say, the third Thursday of every month. And we have tremendous engagement from many of the counties and cities across the state of Montana. Andrew does a great job of leading and creating all sorts of great conversation and content for people to review. And there's just a great amount of banter that goes back and forth on GIS and helping helping GIS professionals help each other out through that. And then the other thing in that vein is thanking Rob All, who is our grants and scholarship coordinator for MAGIP, in supporting an elementary school in I can't remember, right next to Bozeman, but anyway, working with a teacher there to understand drones and mapping out noxious weeds around the community, and there's just been a tremendous amount of good things going on with that project. As far as upcoming activities and initiatives, we're in full swing of preparation for the Big Sky GeoCon. We are set with most of our workshops. The workshops are all organized, and if that hasn't already gone out, will be going out shortly. And then the speakers, we have a tremendous amount of folks that have or offered to contribute to speakers, and Michelle, our administrative person, is working on getting all with Eric and the committee there to get all of those speakers planned out. Couple of other things to talk about. We're looking at developing a code of ethics. Notice that ERISA had a code of ethics, and one of the things that was part of the member meeting at Big Sky GeoCon this year that we want to talk about is, do we want to have a code of ethics? What does a code of ethics mean? What should it look like? So that will be part of our member meeting. And then Mike Idem and I from the membership engagement committee are looking at a strategic planning exercise, doing a stakeholder survey using survey 123. I need to get a meeting set with him, but we'd like to have that feedback as part of the member meeting with the Big Sky GeoCon. Finally, I'd just like to offer an invitation of collaboration with this group. One of the things that Aaron Fashway, Gail, and many others on the MAGIC board have been talking about is the old technical sessions that MAGIP used to have, where we would provide essentially introductory training to a lot of folks on GIS across the state of Montana. That's gone away with the Big Sky GeoCon going to a yearly conference. And so we don't know if we have the capacity to put something like that on, but we think there's a significant need to do introductory GIS training for local government, like small towns, sparsely populated counties across the state of Montana, to help and support them and develop them as GIS professionals. Just to let you know, MAGIP board is a board of 11 professionals from across the state of Montana. There are people from local government, from state government, from the state library that have been very involved with that organization. And we've even had members, don't have any currently, but members in the past from the private sector as well. And I think there's even federal, there are a couple different federal government geospatial professionals there. Anyway, we have monthly meetings, we're just trying to manage mostly the Big Sky GeoCon and making sure that that's the best that it can be, but would definitely appreciate your feedback on MAGIP's role and the scholarships, the grants that we provide, and making sure that we collaborate with you. Thank you for the opportunity to meet with you all. Extremely excited to be part of this conversation today with the inaugural meeting. And if you're interested, I don't know if it's logistically possible, but we would love to have your next meeting at the Big Sky GeoCon in April, if that's possible. Aaron, I don't know if that's gonna work, but that's my update. I hope that works or is sufficient. So
Thanks, Jeff. We'll be talking about meeting dates coming up, and I know that we want the council to have some kind of presence at the GeoCon. Any questions for Jeff? Thanks for that really thorough update. Genevieve, I don't know if I'm allowed to be a presenter. Can I share my screen?
You're the chair.
Okay. Great, thank you. So I just wanted to take a little bit of time during the meeting to walk us through some of the changes that we've gone through, especially since the last council met in June. We did go through a fairly extensive administrative rules update, and Jeff mentioned that. And so we wanted to spend some time talking with the council about some of those changes and what that might mean for our work. So let me make sure that I am sharing my screen. Oh, sure. Sorry, Aaron, go ahead. Look at the agenda.
Just get things situated here. Got a lot to update everyone on. Okay. Boy, not having 3 screens is really challenging me right now. Okay, here we go. Okay, let me give my report. So again, my name is Erin Fashway. I know most of you very well. Happy to be here today. Happy to see you all either in person or online, and be seeing you soon at Big Sky GeoCon, if not sooner. Here are the high level things I wanted to speak with you all about, give you an update on. So we're gonna touch on the grant program. You probably have been seeing all my communication come forward. And the Esri Master Purchase Agreement. I want to talk a little bit about that. I want to talk about our 2023 Montana Imagery Summit, the strategic goals we've achieved to date, and where we're at in the process, generally speaking. Touch a little bit on MAGIP and then the National States Geographic Information Council, and then potentially, I want to bring up the discussion about community-based maps in general. So we have opened our application period. So the Montana Geospatial Information Act supports a grant program. And you're gonna have to forgive me. I probably will call it MLIA at some point. You might still see MLIA. It's like, it's really hard to change the name. So we have been diving deep and so please don't, I'm not gonna be offended if you tell me that there's an error. I will fix any kind of web page or anything like that. So if you see anything, let me know. So we've opened it up. So I am happy to say this is the first time I've opened it this early in the history of, I've been working on the administration of the grant program. And so we opened it up a few days early. And we, because we were in this process of changing administrative rule, which Jenny's going to talk on, we went and we were using, to be standardized, we were using the old administrative rule because we had to set forth our schedules in advance. And once the new Geospatial Act was enacted, basically that threw the old rule out the window, so to speak. And so we were operating under the old rule because we, for this program, because we needed to have some sort of expectations that we could achieve. And so we stuck to the January 15th to March or to February 15th dates that were in rule before. Jenny will go over those, but those have been removed. And so we have opened registration and are starting to collect applications, or not applications, registrations. I think we've got 6 in the system right now. And the deadline for registration, because we actually have to do something on our end, is noon the same day of the application deadline. So we want to make sure that we are able to, we actually have to approve all the registrations. And you would be surprised because we have seen some testing going on of our system that includes, you know, fake people. So, and then the deadline is February 29th at 5 p.m. Leap year. I think many of you have seen our notifications go out through our Gov delivery system, which is the way we are, I guess, doing mass emailing. It's been nice to standardize on something, but here are the additional notifications that we sent out. Just, I think people want to know, you know, how we're communicating this grant opportunity. And so we sent it to all of our Gov delivery lists, so that those lists alone reach at least 2,000 people with the groups that I've chosen. Of course, we redistribute to the MAGIP listserv. I redistribute to MACO, League of Cities and Towns maps, and all of those are done based on just my partnerships and the relationships I have set with those communities. I'm not a member of their listservs. I cannot communicate with their groups directly, and so that's the best way is through our contacts at these professional organizations. So MACO is Association of Counties, League of Cities and Towns is MLCT. The third is MAP, Montana Association of Planners. Marls is Registered Land Surveyors. The PSAPs is a group of folks when I'm working with Michael and his contacts there. Those are public safety answering points. So those are the folks that are doing 911. MACR is Association of Clerk and Reporters, which also includes the election administrators. And then I work with the geospatial, regional geospatial advisor from the BIA, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, to redistribute to the tribes because he has their GIS contacts. And then I also emailed my university contacts and asked them to distribute to some of their lists as well. Training this year, we decided to do a little differently. We had a two-part seminar series. They were practically the same, but we wanted to hit two different folks of people, the people who knew that they were going to be creating a grant early and had interest early. And then of course, the folks that had never maybe heard about the grant program and wanted to, and just after the application opened. So getting the attention of all the folks who were ready to take that training. I think I like the way that we set this up, and what I think I'll continue to do in the future is have that first grant writing seminar series even earlier, maybe in coordination with a tech session, definitely in coordination with MAGIP, focus more on grant writing in general, and then have another series or another training right upon the release of the application that still focuses on grant writing, but focuses more on the application itself. I think that just based on some of our recent interactions, that would be pretty good. The first was a 4.5-hour training. We had 36 registrants. In addition to conducting these online webinars, we had negotiated with our contractor, Janet Cornish of Community Development Services of Montana, an office hour series, so that folks who wanted to further develop their idea would be able to work with her directly. She has had a lot of experience in grant writing, and she teaches technical writing at Montana Tech, and she does have a background with the GIS community. And so we only had one attendee take advantage of that. And yesterday was our second training. We're going to open up office hours. And so what we're guaranteeing is those that have attended the webinar are able to ask for a 1-hour session with Janet as an office hour. And the point of that is to see an improvement to grant writing and scoping and budgeting and just an overall better application. Okay. The one thing I wanted to give an update on, because we hadn't had a council meeting to address some of the changes of the seen in the Geospatial Information Act, we didn't want to rename the Land Information Plan, the Geospatial Information Plan, and make edits to that without having a council in place. And so for the purposes of the grant program, we needed to have some priorities written down. And so we created, we're basically pointing everyone to the Land Information Plan. We're just calling it the Geospatial Information Plan in all of our presentations and all of our documentation. Even though it hasn't been officially renamed, we haven't touched the document since it was passed over a year ago. And so we created this document just to kind of fulfill that need to outline those priorities for the grant process itself. We did introduce one new priority as a result of all the LiDAR collection that's being done, which is eventually going to make its way into a new hydro model, so the LE hydro program. This is a pilot because we want to test it out to see how it's going to go for us. We have not had a hydro priority in a very long time, basically due to lack of interest. And so we decided to try to work with some folks in the community to raise interest in this program. And so the expectation is we would set aside a certain amount of money for this, for them, the applicant to then participate and fill out an application for another grant program with the federal government. And so we would be the match. And we, of course, would work with them and partner with them on developing that grant opportunity with the feds. And I know that Troy is on the line, and I will call on him to maybe just give another briefly high update about this, if you'd like, Troy.
I think you covered that really well, Aaron. I'll just point out, like, we're really just looking for like 1 or 2 10-digit hucks. So pretty small areas. So it's really just a pilot to figure out what this is all about, and then figure out if we can take advantage of this USGS 3DHP program to leverage the funding. Thanks, Aaron.
Yep. Okay. Are there any questions about the grant program? Yes, Troy, I'm gonna let you, I'll let you take that. Would you mind discussing again, high level, how the LiDAR collection will impact the new hydro?
All right, so the all the new hydrography will be derived directly from the LiDAR data. So just very conceptually, water flows downhill. So if you've got very good elevation data, you can make very good predictions of where streams and rivers are. And so the big change for hydrography is it's going to be more consistent. So right now, the current hydrography is based on imagery. A lot of it is based on the original topographic maps. And so different areas of the state are done at different accuracies and different densities. And so the idea here is once we have statewide LiDAR and you can use that elevation to create the hydrography, then statewide, you'll have a consistent state, data set statewide. I didn't hear the question, so if there was a more specific question there, I didn't catch it.
Sorry, Troy, I didn't have my mic on.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about Yellowstone County, and so this is a pilot program and you're looking for something that's really basic. I mean, so I'm assuming we're talking streams and the Yellowstone River type of thing. I'm kind of looking more at an actual ditch project. Is that too detailed of something that you're looking for this kind of thing?
Yeah, so this would primarily be surface water. So we would get a very accurate center line for that ditch, like the location of that ditch.
Right.
But like information beyond that, like where the ditch is failing or things like that, that wouldn't be part of this information. I will add though, like you're probably interested in like maybe within the city boundaries as well. So like stormwater and how water flows through the city environment. That is of high interest as well. And so I wouldn't say that we want a simple 10-digit huck, like something in the uplands that's pretty straightforward. A mix in there with the city environment would be very attractive as well.
Okay, thank you.
Jeff, you have a question?
I was just going to say that I support that question that Mike, and maybe Billings Yellowstone County could be a good opportunity there. So it'd be interesting to have more conversations with Mike and Troy to see if there's an opportunity.
Great.
And then I did have, Aaron, I don't know if you had said something about questions on the grant process. Is this an appropriate time? There was a little bit of feedback I got last night on MGIA grants. And I don't know if this would be the place for that or if there's another place for that in this meeting.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So one of the things that Rob brought up last night, and I've seen it be very successful in a grant process that I've been involved for, is a tiered grant process where you have money for planning. So you go out and you hire an organization like Sanborn or something like that to help you understand like the GIS planning needs that you have, and then have like a second tier of grants where you actually do the implementation based on that planning. And so I didn't know if that had been discussed, but that was something that Rob wanted me to bring up today, and I think I've seen it work very well, and I'd support that if that's an option. So.
We do have a priority for planning grants, and certainly be willing to take feedback on that. It's not typically, we haven't had many requests for it actually. And, but it was created, it was an idea of the subcommittee several years ago, because what we were seeing was an underdeveloped, unrealistic scoping by grantees, that the project was just not ready. It just hadn't been thoroughly vetted and could go through, if it went through a planning process, that and the planning process prepared it for that next year of submitting that MGIA grant. That was the original intent. And so what we had done in the past is there were a few grant, I think there maybe just one. I'm sorry, I don't have the details in front of me, but it was inappropriately scoped, and we used that tool. We used that grant as a tool to kick it back as a planning grant, with the hopes that they would come back with a better, more developed scope that following grant year.
Thank you, Erin. That's good information.
Yep.
And good question for the council to think about as we continue to think about the council's role in helping us to develop that grant program. Gail, you had your hand up.
Yes, I actually I would like to find out more information about this grant program, and just also throw Gallatin County and the city of Bozeman maybe as somebody to consider. So we actually are having LiDAR flown in April of this year, so we'll have a new LiDAR data set. And I would be really interested to know the details of the grant. Also wondering if you would be partnering with the universities like Montana State University, because we have actually, the city of Bozeman's been working with Montana State University to update our hydrography in the city. And I know that National Parks and Gallatin Watershed, I always forget their name. I think it's Gallatin Watershed Council. They actually are working to also update the hydrography. So I would be interested in learning more about the grant. Thank you.
Thanks, Gail.
I will say that the the way to participate in the LA Hydro program, so this will be the new version of the NHD, so the National Hydrography Database, is through this federal grant program. And so any updates that are made outside of this program, I cannot guarantee that they will be incorporated into those data sets. And so they're still working out those details. And Troy might have a little more information, but that's one of the things that we coordinate with nationally with NISJIC and some of those other committees at the national level. So I will, I think that Troy had done some coordination after we had initially talked about that with you, Gail, a few months ago. And so he will be the contact for you to continue to work with there. And just to, I think it'd be great if, you know, we could get more participation in this federal program, whether within the or under the MGIA grant program or outside of it. And so please continue to work with Troy and I on those things. That would be my advice right now.
Any other? Go ahead, Erin.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to let you all know that the Esri Master Purchase Agreement that you local government and state government purchase off of to get government discounted pricing has expired. As far as I have been told by Esri, you will be honored under the old pricing lists, and the old contract that kind of covers services and software. So this isn't a mechanism for all state and local government to purchase off of. It's if you've ever looked at the price list, it's like a, I don't know, 50 or 60 page price list. I am working hard with ITSD and Esri to get this renegotiated. We had been amending it for years, and we've gotten to the point where it's been amended too many times. And we need to rewrite the contract or redevelop the contract. And so it's very key to some renegotiations that I'm currently doing. So, and I saw some emails come flying back and forth this morning. So I just want to let you know that I've been told that you as local governments should continue to see the master purchase agreement pricing from the previous price lists. You'll probably see an increase in pricing because they promised us increased pricing from here on out every year. Yeah, annually, unless we're locked in to a master purchase agreement that would be covered for 2 years. So I'm going to hopefully work on getting that in place. So that's where we stand. I just wanted to communicate that to you all, that we are currently negotiating. And this past December, we had our first inaugural imagery summit. And it went really well. And we had it here at the Delta in Helena, the Delta Hotel. The idea was spawned from the NISJIC event, with Jenny and I kind of discussing our imagery needs and interests as a state with some of the NISJIC partners, and some of the interests that we have moving forward with the next legislative session and potentially bringing forth new requests. And so the point was to kind of get folks together, start the discussion about what an imagery program could look like for the state of Montana, gain interest, understand needs, and then get the working group started. So the first day, for those of you that didn't attend, sorry if you can't read that, it was pretty great. We had folks from my counterpart, the GIO from Indiana, Megan Compton, and the GIO from Kentucky, Kent Ines, talk about their imagery programs, and it was really well received. And it was just nice to have another state's perspective. And they were able to go through, kind of the ins and outs of their programs and the successes and failures and whatnot, and recommendations. We got an update from NAEP, from the USDA, and I wanted to make that connection for James Merrill, who is our USDA rep, and he's the one we should be working with when it comes to NAEP, especially me at the national level. And I wanted to make that connection with the GIS community. So we got a pretty good understanding of where we're at with NAEP. And then we just had experts from the imagery sector give us presentations throughout the afternoon. And then one of the more, I think, well-received pieces of the program happened at the beginning of the morning. And I took a kind of a play out of the NISJIC playbook and did something called a roll call that they do at every annual meeting. And basically it was a short, I guess you could consider them like a lightning round, topics of imagery needs from city, county, and state agencies. I did seek tribal input, but it wasn't enough time, unfortunately. I cannot remember if we got, I don't think we did. But we had some tribal representatives on the call, but I did not get a presentation. But a lot of folks really thought that it was well conducted and really liked hearing those perspectives. So we'll probably try to use that again, that format in the future. And then, so I did a Menti because that's the new thing to do. And so this was the biggest challenges to starting an imagery program. So these were, everyone's kind of impressions. So funding, money, collaboration, infrastructure, governance. So those were some of the major things that kind of came up. And then we wanted to just get a better understanding of how people kind of take the temperature of the day. And so the first one, that was the people's impressions from day one. So we think it was very useful. We did record the event, and those recordings will be available online soon. And then the second day was basically a working group meeting. So getting folks, restarting that imagery working group meeting. We hadn't met in a few years, and kind of reestablishing what we were trying to accomplish as a working group, and just kind of having some overall high level topics. We also heard from Jeff Lovin of Woolpert. He gave the state of Ohio example and how they're running their imagery program, just so again we could hear from another state on how things were going. And he had particularly worked with Ohio, which is why he was able to give that presentation. And then we just asked the working group what they would like to see address in the working group address in the next 2 years. And so some of the things that are right in line with what we want to do is, you know, create a plan, have an inventory, understand use cases, understand need, and of course, attempt to go after some funding. So our major staff takeaways is a Montana imagery repository is needed. It is desired, especially with on the state government side of things. Being able to expose the imagery that's already been collected is really important. Having a one-stop shopping is important. Centralizing the data and not having duplication of environments, and the need to have duplication of even personnel in certain cases, I think is really important. And second would be the Montana imagery acquisition is desired. We saw that mostly from several state agencies and local government, is that the NAEP is not enough. And you as local government are obviously out there collecting imagery on a regular basis. There's been some desire from the Department of Revenue, the Department of Transportation, and several others about collecting imagery regularly. Maybe not on statewide, but on a regional basis. And then finally, continued coordination and collaboration is essential to move something like this along. Oh, I did not enter in here, but Tina Miller from Esri gave me this really awesome quote, and I really liked it, and I asked if I could share it. She said that she was impressed with the event and really liked the collaborative nature of it, so I just wanted to share that with the group. Oh, there it is. We doubled it up. All right. Well, I guess, are there any questions about the imagery? Yeah, Summit.
Just real quick, who's the contact? Yourself, Troy, at the state library?
Yeah, you can contact me.
Okay. That would.
Yeah. Right now it's Troy and I, but I let him handle the technical stuff and I'm doing the other things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we just got ours from this past spring, and you want it for your repository.
We're interested. We're not quite ready yet, but yeah.
Okay. Well, we just over the weekend shared it up to Esri, so they should have it.
Oh, great.
And they'll work it into their base map. So
nice. Is that a different program from the community-based map program?
I believe so. It's their imagery side.
Okay.
So the imagery-based map. Yeah. No, they do everything through AWS.
Right.
S3, and so we just set a script running over the weekend and copied all of our geotiffs up to that location, and then they'll note it and then mesh it into the imagery. We did the same with our 2018. So.
Okay.
But yeah, no, if you guys want it, we'll get it to you at some point in time as well.
Okay, thank you. So we had started a strategic planning process in 2021, I think. It's been a while. And I believe as 2022, we adopted a strategic plan that highlighted 5 goals that we were attempting to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years. And the one goal we decided to work on first, it was prioritized first, is to improve communication to our stakeholders in the GIS community. And so we have been working very hard, and I'm very proud of the progress we have made to date, and really grateful for the staff's dedication to working on this and kind of getting our house in order to be better at communicating to stakeholders. One of those is just our web presence. It's massive. We have a lot of information to give. And so we have been working with Esri to better understand how we can use the COTS out of the box without having to do too much coding, and we don't want to recreate the wheel. We want to use something that's readily accessible. and use the software we have already invested in. And so the state, I do not remember when they started using ServiceNow as a tool for communication, and gosh, it's an everything tool, customer service, customer support requests. And so we last 2 Decembers ago, we started a process to centralize all of our tech support into ServiceNow. So we are slowly starting to roll that out to our communities. You've probably seen, if you've contacted me and say, I'm going to put a ticket in for you. And so it's a ticketing system that will centralize all of our IT requests and data requests and service requests into one location. So we kind of came at it a little more, I guess, we came at it initially with having multiple forms and maybe a little more complicated. Then we quickly realized internally that we needed to simplify it. So we went from like having multiple forms to one form. And so you need to be authenticated through an Okta account, which is the state's authentication system if you're going to be utilizing it. But that's how we are going to be requesting all of our support come through. This is like, when I talk about support, I mean, you've discovered an error with the NAEP and it's no longer drawing at a certain scale, or you have had, you know, a certain browser, the cadastral no longer works in. So some tech support issues such as that. But also like I have new LiDAR data and I'd like it implemented into the statewide LiDAR data set. And so we'll start with that system. It will keep us organized and allow us to track how we are spending our time. And from that, we'll garner more information about maybe additional trainings that are needed, where resources need to be put. If we're, you know, obviously seeing something broken, it's going to draw a red flag to that. In the past, we were just using a spreadsheet and trying to track when we were on call. And that helped us really, actually prepared us for the past few legislative sessions to give us that business level data of what we were, I guess, where the calls were coming the most about in regards to tech support or just general inquiries. You probably could guess it's cadastral. And things like that. So that has been implemented. And we are starting to softly roll that out through our website. And then just when we are maybe out of the office, you'll see that automatic response, or taking phone calls, we'll be entering all the information into ServiceNow. So appreciate your patience on that, and just know that that's the method we'd like to use moving forward when it comes to services or tech support requests. A lot of you have been patient with me because I happen to let the cat out of the bag and tell you that we are developing a GIS web best practices document, and a lot of you have been chomping at the bit to get that document, and we are almost ready to release it. And so we have worked internally with staff to, we've been doing it since, we just settled the process 2 weeks ago, and we started it in May. And it is a very thorough document. It is 90 pages. Yes. And it covers best practices and governance for ArcGIS Online and Portal. And so we will start implementing that internally to our subscription and our portal accounts. But then because of the desired interest and some of the other things we're working on in regards to creating best policies and policies and best practices, perhaps this could be a soon to be proposed best practice that could be adopted by this council and maybe the greater community. Or it could be a start for one that could be more general in nature. We have started, like I said earlier, the web presence is our web presence. We have a lot of information out there. We have a lot of web pages to maintain. And so we have been working with some experts from Esri about the best ways to serve out geospatial data with the tools that we've already invested in. And so we've been exploring Hub more and developing Hub. We have a really great template that we're starting to figure out how we're going to I guess, take all the information we have out there currently. So this will replace the GIS data list that we have. And so we are going to start with all our internal data that we maintain and manage, and getting that integrated into a new hub. And then in addition to that, work on a best practice for integrating outside data sets. And so similarly to the GIS data list, it was the catalog, it was the central repository and the central catalog, the clearinghouse for GIS data in the state. We would like to continue with that and use this hub to promote that clearinghouse. And so that will be, I think it's gonna be a pretty heavy lift. And so it will take time, but we are moving towards one central model, and it will be built off of hub technology. In addition to that, we have started to standardize how we are building our experience builder templates, our applications and dashboards and web maps. And so we had conducted an experience builder training for staff, and from that have developed templates that you'll start to be seeing when we release new geospatial data assets and tools. That's a lot. So I remember clearly that Alan had said back a few years ago, I don't want to see a strategic plan just sit on a shelf. We want to see that this is being implemented. So that is my report to tell you that we are taking it very seriously. We have a lot of work to do, and we are implementing it. And this one we thought was the most important to start on, but also there was a lot of, like I said, work we had to do before we could even start some of these tasks to kind of get our house in order. And it's going well. Are there any questions about that? Okay. Lee had mentioned that she had been working with us. So there was a group that was, I guess, appointed to work on developing the strategic plan, or the business plans, which address each strategic goal. And so it was 2 members of the council and then several members of staff. And so Lee thankfully continued working on that, even though she had not been reappointed yet. And because of her continued support, I think we've been successful. And just, it was nice to have an outside opinion and a past council member on there. And we have developed 2 additional business plans. Those are posted online if you'd like to read those. The develop policies and best practices for geospatial data, which we'll talk about later, and then the create and strengthen partnerships. We are at the tail end of the continue to improve the collection, maintenance, and dissemination of authoritative geospatial information. So the MSDI, that one, we're right at the tail end. I think we'll be having a final version of that, hopefully in the next month or 2. I'm going to go through this kind of quickly now. Jeff did a great job of talking about MAGIP. We are not having a council meeting there this year, but we had decided to try to do more of a council panel. And so I was talking with Gail the other day, and so I think that we might have a slot. I do not remember it because I didn't write it down, but it unfortunately still conflicts with your schedules, Jenny. This is a great community to get involved with, to reach out to your geospatial constituents. If you're not a member or haven't been a member to date, definitely would like for you to become a member. We can get them under our, we can pay for your membership as a council member under ours, and like for you to join us in April.
That hasn't been finalized. of that panel. So, I mean, if you still have, I mean, we're working on the scheduling right now. So, I mean, if you want it on a Thursday instead of a Wednesday, I mean, we can certainly do that. You know,
Right.
want to have that panel. So, I mean, we do need to know kind of soon, but just so you're aware that it's still fluid
Okay.
at the moment. So,
Okay, thank you. The National States Geographic Information Council is a national organization made up of my counterparts, other coordinators, and geographic information officers, council members, and other state geospatial leads, in addition to top private sector industry technical experts. We consider those partners to NSGIC. So those are all the private sector folks that belong. University, we've been trying to get more local government involved. Tribal government, the NTGIS, which is the National Tribal GIS Association, and then the federal government. And so this is where we help develop and build national policy that will eventually, hopefully, impact the way we are doing things as a state. Like one really successful example is that the LIDAR program. If it weren't for NSGIC, we probably wouldn't have gotten as far as we are with that federal program. And then a lot of the work that's being done with the Next Gen 911 and building those national data sets that are standardized throughout all sectors. And so I represent the state of Montana on the council. There are many different ways you can get involved. The council membership is covered, or has been covered by MSL, and we want to continue to cover that and continue to encourage your membership. There is a council of councils. You can meet your counterparts if you attend these conferences or get a part of, join the my.NSGIC community. And there's webinars and lots of different information. So if you don't have a good handle on a specific, maybe technical topic, they cover them in these 101 seminars, which are really quite good. And then we've got a couple conferences coming up. So mid-year meeting is going to be in DC, and then the annual conference, which we'll talk about later. So keep that in mind. I would like to send a couple folks this year to these conferences. And of course it would be paid for by the council's budget. And I do believe Lee is the only one that's attended currently. Lee and Jenny are the only ones that have attended that are currently on the council. So I highly recommend joining the community. There's a lot of different places you could get involved, and they're pretty welcoming, so they would take more folks who are interested. Let's just see. I wanted to bring up, I did see that Butte Silver Bow was in the participant list, or I saw them come on a minute or two ago. I guess I wanted just to start this discussion because it was brought up to me last week. Basically, we saw a reversion in some of the data that is being put out by one of the national or one of the private base map programs. And so I think that there is a greater discussion to have, and I wanted the council to be aware of it. I believe in certain cases it's a coordination issue. It's maybe not there may be some technical issues as well, but basically what had happened was, and I'm still collecting more information. Esri works with a private partner, and that private partner had changed, and the base maps are put out by these private partners. And when they did the change, it reverted to old data. And so this is just an example of a screenshot that the Butte Silver Bow had sent me discussing this. That's the Berkeley Pit, and that is a railroad running over it. And so we're thinking the data is probably 50 or 60 years old. I'm not quite sure. I have been in contact with folks from Esri and we're trying to discover, get to the root of the problem. I've been in contact with the president of NISJIC because I do believe this could be a pretty big problem, and it is, like I said, a coordination issue. We have been working hard to establish these national data infrastructure layers where we would expect to see our data layers that we're putting into these national data sets be used by these industries or industry leaders. And so I'm trying to understand the problem more to then better communicate that. Essentially, if you are a community-based map member, which is an actual program that's with Esri, you would be able to update the data, but there's a lot of, I would call them the have-nots here in Montana. So these small communities where their data might have been changed recently, and they're probably unaware of these changes, and they are being used in key business practices and workflows in local government, including public safety. So I'm going to watch this and research it further because I believe it needs a lot of attention and quickly. I think Esri is taking it very seriously, and I talked to the regional manager, Mathieu Denuel, yesterday. I'm not sure if anyone from Esri is on the line, and I let them know that I would be bringing this up today. But I just wanted to kind of start the conversation. It was also brought up at the local government SIG last week. And so it's been brought up multiple times, and I wanted to throw it out there. Eric, I know you've had a good experience, and I don't think that this is program specific to Esri's base map program. I think the other thing that we've always talked about is how do we participate in these programs, Google Maps and OpenStreetMap, things like that. And so I think my job is to coordinate nationally and ensure that they are using these national assets that we're feeding into, and then locally making sure that we're collecting this from local government and getting, if possible, getting the data as quickly as possible integrated into our statewide data sets. So
You want to say something, Lee?
I do. One thing that I think would be useful is somehow we can verify contacts and who do we contact and how. I've been contacted by somebody for data and imagery. It did not feel legit at all, and I didn't know how to verify that, and so I denied the request. And I'm not sure if that was right or not, but I didn't have a way to verify it. So some consideration on that in that coordination piece is how do we confirm that we're getting legit requests and participating in the legit interaction there.
Yeah, and that's, we haven't received a request like that in a long time. We used to actually get emails, letters from private companies, TomTom or something like that, saying, hey, can you give us your data? And, of course, it's public data. And I just go download it. And then, no, we need it certified or something like that. And I'm like, well, I didn't have a level of how to respond to that because it's right there. We have it publicly available. But to your point about the community-based map, we've shared, we shared our initial data a number of years ago. We've set up a couple of our data sets are now set up on 6-month, their feature services. Esri just connects, scheduled on every 6 months. We get an auto email from the community map program saying your data is we're going to be downloading your data. And then another email saying it's been downloaded. We're going to be integrating it. And then another one saying if you want to review, here's where you can go to review those changes. And so it's during that 6-month time period when it happens, there's quite a bit of notification from that side of things in terms of here's the data we're going to be updating, along those sides. I also know, and this came up in the local government SIG last week, they have a pretty good editing app as well, so that someone can get on there and make changes. But something like this, where a railroad line is what you're saying, probably 50 years ago, 60 years ago, for something like that to suddenly revert back is a bigger question. So how and where it happens, I mean, if you go into that base map, it's not an OpenStreetMap, it's not in their streets, it's not in, and so where that data came from is, and what data provider gave it to them is the question. So, and to your other point, I know there's been conferences, big site geocons, and where local government folks, and this has been more from the addressing side of things, about communities, the level of participation, I guess that's the best way, that local governments may make themselves get involved in terms of updating the Google Street Map, the OpenStreetMap, at what point in time, what's our level, what should we be doing, type of thing. I mean, we maintain our roads and our roads and addresses for emergency services, and we have that data available. But then is it on us to go into Google and say, yeah, we've just added 20 streets for a new subdivision, or OpenStreetMap, are we supposed to be, is that on us, or is that just on, where's that level, and so, because you get that, you'll get the citizen will be coming in and saying, yeah, our road doesn't show up in our vehicle GIS or GPS, FedEx won't deliver, my address doesn't show up. And I'm like, well, we send it to them, it's on their shoulders to update their data set. So, so that's a whole nother discussion right there. And then on that side of things, are they getting it from the locals, or are they pulling it from the state infrastructure? And because we share with you guys, and so are they gonna, who's the definitive source at some point in time for them to update their data? So, but
I think these are all really great points, because I think if you knew that you could depend on us to update it, and it was agreed upon frequency,
yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure they would never cut you out of the ability to update your data, but if there was an emergency, I think that we need to figure this out as a community, because, and I'm going to ask Michael to step up to the microphone and give a little feedback, because remember, it was like 10 years ago, you and I participated in the pilot program for community-based maps. And it was the same thing that stopped us. It's just like, they wanted us to sign something as like, our data is open, and that kind of held things up. But then I know that they changed things recently, and it was no longer, you had to sign a waiver or anything like that. Cause we had refused at the time to sign anything, and said, our data is open, please go ahead and grab it.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael, can you give a little bit of feedback about our experiences contributing, and what, I know we've seen recent communication about, I guess, dedication to using the NAD, the National Address Data Set, and just, I know you've had interactions with Google.
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to this, but in terms of specifically address points, Montana has participated in the National Address Database effort since more or less the beginning. We weren't one of the pilot states, but I think we were one of the first states in after the pilot effort. And that's basically a program that we as a state take the local data and work with the US DOT to integrate it into the National Address Database. As that program has evolved, Google, Esri, TomTom, there's at least a couple others, have all started harvesting that address data from that and are integrating it into their services, base maps, data sets, et cetera. It is a little bit of a black box sort of thing. Like, we don't know how often Google, for example, pulls that data, or how much of that address data, you know, they'll actually incorporate, or what kind of processes they go through on their end to say, yeah, we're gonna accept this point and throw out this old point that we had or something like that. Google's a little bit more closed about how they deal with that, but I do know Esri pulls in that data, and my understanding is they do incorporate it into their world geocoding service. They are a little bit more transparent about how they do that. They have their own feature services that reflect, you know, their most recent harvest from the NAD. There's NISJIC has been kind of pushing on this, and NISJIC was a major player in formation of the NAD. On the road centerline aspect, they've been kind of pushing on that as well, because that's equally as problematic, you know, when you look at a base map and it has, you know, incorrect road names or things like that, or missing roads. And they're currently trying to work on a similar process to the NAD to kind of formalize how that roll up from local to state to kind of a true federal level or national level data set can happen, and then in turn be incorporated into private sector, third party services, data sets, et cetera. Does that help? Or is there questions?
Not that I want to keep bringing this up, but well, how often do you guys update the national data set?
So I was on a 6-month update process with them. They recently changed schemas, which kind of caused a cascading effect in terms of creating a lot more backlog on their end to do some updates. So we might be slightly out of sync of that 6-month update with them. Now, I think what you're getting at is like,
well, I'm not trying to put you on the spot or anything, because I mean, I brought up the question about how the state is downloading local data and stuff. But bringing it back to what Eric was saying earlier about like where, I mean, our county, I mean, it's out there for you guys to grab it nightly. I don't know how much more we can do about that. You know, I mean, it's out there, go get it, you know. But then then we still get people calling in saying, well, it's not showing up on the state. And I'm like, well, yeah, I know they've got stuff to do too, you know, and all that stuff. But I mean, there's got to be, and I'm sure that's probably something that's being worked on, and maybe, you know, some kind of plan, some consistency, getting some timelines down where it is a monthly thing, or it's every 6 months it's going out to the national site or something like that. I'm not sure if any of that's written down, or if that's just something that's, but
We are working on a business plan
yeah,
for this specific topic. So that would be the goal 4, and for each MSDI layer, it will be defined, because with that comes a level of, you know, staff involvement and cost to the state. And so we have it, I guess, defined in metadata and how often and what our goal is. So we have, I guess it's defined currently through metadata on how often we update things, but then we can set goals of what's the ideal timeline to get that updated. And I think that would be a great future discussion for the council, like if it's not meeting the needs. But I guess I wanted to bring the conversation back to our contributing to these national base maps. I think that's a good, or private base maps. I think that's a good input that you gave, Michael. Just for us all to kind of understand how some of this data is being taken from us. And I like your example of the black box. We're just not sure where it goes, and we don't get any kind of updates or reports. But Dan is on the line, and I wanted to, Dan, would you mind just talking a little bit about your experience and what you had brought to me last week?
Hi, I'm Dan Janosk. I'm the GIS coordinator here for Butte Silverbow. So yeah, when we spoke with Aaron last week, we had submitted a correction for the old base maps, and that had subsequently started the conversation of that the new base maps were coming out, and we spoke with Shane Matthews from Esri, and he had an application where he showed a side-by-side, and we quickly started noticing things like the railroad. Silverbow Creek definitely does not go through the pit anymore. And we're missing parks. Some federal land was shown as federal, and it had been sold off and is now private. So those are the kind of issues we had. We spoke with Shane Matthews December 14th. And then from there, he said it was going to come, the new maps are coming out Q1, and it wasn't until probably mid-January we had realized that they had actually just December 31st cut it and rolled straight to the new maps without making any of the changes. Some of the issues we run into with the local government is we only track what our city and county own. We don't necessarily track, a park owned and maintained by Montana Tech. Our big example there is the Big Butte open space. It's just kind of how our stuff has been done. So trying to get updates pushed out is something we're still trying to work on top of our workloads already. And then whatever the group consensus is here, that's going to be, the steps moving forward. So we're kind of a unified front in this. And as Aaron mentioned, we're one of the counties that does have GIS professionals, but we don't have, there's other counties like Deer Lodge that we've noticed issues that doesn't have a on-staff GIS person, they contract out.
Thanks, Dan. Esri, Matthew he did want to know what he could do to help and, to fill the gap. And I said, we're going to try to figure it out, and did offer assistance, didn't want us to feel like we were left hanging. And so, a lot of folks call our state rural, and I think, I grew up in rural Ohio, and certain parts of Montana I would call frontier, not rural. And it's just that you cannot compare the two communities. And so I've been asking for a while to have more outreach and boots on the ground here in Montana, because I don't think coming to the conference once a year, or a few years ago, once every other year, or once every 2 years to Montana, just to, be at a conference is enough for what we're seeing with the grant program and then just with our data partners. And so they are committed to joining me and, maybe creating that user groups and just checking in more with the communities that really need the support. So I am hopeful. I feel like this is an issue we probably should tackle as a community, just the greater how we participate in these types of programs. But also this one in particular, trying to deal with some of the issues that have come out of it is going to be a priority of mine in the next few weeks, to just research it further to see what we can do. But I've already alerted the people, and the conversations at the high ups are happening. So, and I really thank Butte Silverbow for reaching out and letting me help on behalf of the state of Montana. That's it. And I think we've dealt with all the questions.
Any other questions for Aaron? Thanks for that thorough update. All right. Now let's dive in and talk a little bit about legislative and administrative rules updates. And just by way of some brief background, the original Land Information Act was passed in 2005. And as I said earlier, as we gained 15 plus years of experience with some of the requirements in statute, we found that there was a need to update that statute. Some of those requirements that just put additional work on the agency without adding a lot of efficiency were things like requiring us to adopt an annual land information plan where we set out the goals and priorities for data development and GIS coordination. And we realized over the years that requiring us to plan on an annual cycle didn't allow us to have time to evaluate what we were accomplishing under the goals of the plan, and in particular, the work of the grant program, which is intended to help us meet the goals of the plan. And so that was really creating a lot of inefficiency and lack of opportunity for us to continue to find opportunities for improvement. Similarly, one of the other major barriers of the existing legislation was it required a new council to be appointed every 2 years. There was no kind of staggered appointment process within the legislation. And it was a very large council, which can be good, but it can also be unwieldy at times. And so those were some of the kinds of issues within the legislation that we chose to address during the 2023 legislative cycle. You've probably heard of the governor's office's red tape relief initiative, where they are working to try to reduce redundancy and red tape and inefficiency throughout state government. And one aspect of that is through the boards and councils that advise the work of the state government. And so we had the support of the governor's office to carry forward some of those legislative changes. And the updates to the legislation went through really well in the legislative session, and we heard a lot of great support for the GIS work that we do and support for the state library. And so it was those changes that led to the reformation of this council as the Montana Geospatial Information Act. One of the most obvious changes to the act itself is that it is now the Montana Geospatial Information Act as opposed to the Land Information Act. We made an effort to more broadly define what we mean by geospatial, and we can take a look at that in a minute when we look at the administrative rules. Following on to the passage of the legislation then is a requirement for us to update the administrative rules. And if you're not familiar with the governing documents that govern our work, statute are the laws that we have to follow, and then administrative rules provide more specificity and definition into what it looks like to actually then implement those laws. And so we have a set of administrative rules that provide definitions and more concrete information about what it actually looks like for us to implement the Geospatial Information Act. Lacking a council, but needing to move forward with updating those rules, we did undertake that effort over the course of the fall. We worked with the Lieutenant Governor's office and proposed updates to the administrative rules. We shared them with the State Library Commission, which is our governing body, as draft in October. And then the commission took action to adopt those rules in December. And as a part of the administrative rules process, we're required to post them for a minimum of 30 days for public comment. We received a handful of comments about the rules. We received a letter from Megip, as Jeff said, and then some input from the State Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, just wanting to make sure that they understood how, as an agency, their voice would be heard in the council and in the council decisions and deliberations. So I just wanted to walk through some of the changes in the administrative rules. So let me figure out how I can share my screen here. Okay, does that look like I'm sharing the right screen?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, all right. So these are the administrative rules that exist. If you're not familiar, they're managed. The process for managing rules falls under the auspices of the Secretary of State's office. And statute actually gives us authority to create these kinds of administrative rules. We do have the ability to update them through a process involving the State Library Commission. These changes may be reviewed by the legislature, and the legislature has an opportunity for input, but these don't require any kind of legislative action to adopt. They are adopted by the State Library Commission as the governing body. So again, most obviously, you see changes to the language that was reflected in the updated statute, changing land to geospatial information. And in particular, in the introduction, elimination of that requirement that we have an annual geospatial information plan. And I'll talk about some of the reasons for that and what those changes look like as we get a little bit further into the administrative rules. Some of the definition changes, again, they just define the terminology that's found in legislation and in the administrative rules. These were just more language updates than anything that was truly substantive. But I did want to call out the change to the definition of MSDI. Formerly, it said that it was digitally formatted land information. And we included, in addition to changing it to geospatial information, the policies, best practices, and data products that are identified by the council, wanting to be more inclusive of all of the components that go into having a successful data set or data theme. Some of the changes in red that you'll see are changes that were proposed by the governor's office, just sort of cleanup language. And then we wanted to call out in the definition of theme steward the role that the theme stewards play in leading the development of these themes. That's a really critical role that all of the theme stewards play. We'll talk about who those theme stewards are for the various spatial data sets when we get to the orientation information, but it's obviously important for them to play that kind of leadership role, and then also including not only the information itself, but the technology and the GIS systems that are key components of ensuring that the data is collected, maintained, and made accessible. You'll see that we completely eliminated the rules that pertain to the subcommittees of the council. Under the previous makeup of the council, we had two mandated subcommittees, the subcommittee that helped us draft the land information plan, and then a subcommittee that helped us to review the grant program. And the idea behind eliminating those subcommittees was sort of twofold. The language here, as you can see in the original administrative rules, sort of became unworkable when we had vacancies on the council, when we were required to have certain representation on those councils. So for example, we would often go periods of time without a tribal representative. And so when we had those vacancies, we were never able to meet the intent of the administrative rules as written. And then with a smaller council, it's our hope that we can do more work through the entire council through consensus, maybe with some individual volunteers, and then also be inclusive of the wider GIS community in some of the work to develop our geospatial information plan and provide guidance on our grant programs and other things. So those are the reasons behind eliminating the specific language requiring us to have those subcommittees. Nothing in this change prevents us from having work groups and subcommittees to address different kinds of needs, but we're no longer mandated or bound to this kind of language. And then specifically with regard to the geospatial information plan, again, you'll see that we changed the language from the land information plan to the geospatial information plan that mirrors the language in the legislation. We eliminated the requirement for an annual plan because, as I said, We never felt like we were accomplishing what we wanted to accomplish or taking the time to evaluate how well we were doing because we were constantly in this planning cycle. The statute changes take out the requirement for a land information plan and require us to review our geospatial information plan at least every 3 years. And importantly, the statute still requires us to do that in coordination with the council. So those requirements haven't changed. And as I said before, the input from the council is really paramount in us having confidence that the plans that we're putting forward will meet the needs of the geospatial community. You see that we've changed some of the dates in the administrative rules in order to give us a little bit more flexibility in ensuring that the goals and priorities that we're setting forward in the geospatial information plan help to inform the grant cycle. We were often running up against periods where we were adopting a land information plan a month or less before the period when the grant application cycle needed to open. So in changing some of those deadlines, we're giving ourselves a little bit more flexibility and opportunity to have the plan better inform the grant cycle. And then by not having to rewrite the plan every year, again, giving us more of an opportunity to ensure that we're accomplishing what we set forward to accomplish. The administrative rules do require us to seek public comment on any updates to the geospatial information plan, and we think that's a really critical component of our work. And then, as I said, that both the legislation and the administrative rules require us to do the planning work in coordination with the council. And then one of the other more significant changes in the administrative rules is to allow for a 2-year grant cycle rather than mandating an annual grant cycle. For those of you who've been involved in the grant program over the years, you'll know that we often have to offer extensions to grant recipients who, for a variety of reasons, may not have been able to complete their grant project within a single granting year. And so really of late, more often than not, we're granting those kinds of extensions. So by allowing a 2-year grant period from the start, we know we're going to find some efficiencies for the grant recipients in not having to go through that extension process, and certainly for our staff in not having to administer extensions and go through some financial accruals processes. And we hope that by having a 2-year project cycle, the grant applications and themselves can better plan for the projects that are going to be accomplished through that grant program. So from the outset, it's our intent on even years as we'd be going into this year after the legislative session, when we know what our funding would be, to have a cycle that allows for a 2-year grant period. Importantly, this doesn't prevent us from offering off-cycle grants. So if we have a typical grant cycle that is for a 2-year period, and after we've awarded those grants or after a period of time we realize we have more funding available, we can always go through an off-cycle grant process and award more grant funds if that's the desire of the council and funding is available to do that. But we feel like having this 2-year period will be just more efficient and more effective for the grant program overall. So that's the reasoning behind these rather significant changes to the administrative rules that govern the grant program itself. And then there was this sort of strange little administrative, oh, go ahead, Eric.
So that I can get a better understanding. So this year, you did roll out the FY25 grant cycle, which was and this was done as a carryover from the old rules. But from this point forward, the grant cycle would be offered on, so FY 26, then 27 be only a supplemental year, and then FY 28 is when the next grant cycle opens. Is that what I'm reading with that? Because on May of each even numbered year, the cycle. So are we saying, so like 2024 is when you would have a grant cycle, 2025, nothing, 26 would be the next. So it's on the even numbered years.
Even numbered calendar years as opposed to fiscal years.
Okay, so even numbered calendar years. So this being 2024, so next year in 25, you wouldn't anticipate opening grants. Is that?
No, we would.
I think we would open grants, but consider it more of an off cycle year if funding is available, just to help us make it through this transition.
Okay, so because I'm trying to get it around my head on how I need to get people coordinated for some stuff. And I think it might help also just explaining that, not just for me, but maybe others on the council. And so 25, any advertising, so in year 2025, any advertising for grants is just kind of more low key, if I will.
Yep.
Whereas in year 2026, it's going to be a bigger push.
Full blown 2-year grant cycle.
Full year 2. Okay.
I think it aligns with the fiscal year, just because we wanted to align with the biennium.
We'll still be aligned with the biennium.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
Well, I think, we have the ability to, the change was to give us the ability to have a 2-year grant cycle.
Yeah, what I heard was
We
that.
always can have a 1 year.
Yeah, what I heard is that in 2026, I could apply and it could just be 1 year, a 1-year grant. I'm going to get all my work done in 1 year, but the option is there to have it be written as a 2-year so that you don't have to deal with all the extensions that you've been doing. So is that how am I stating that correctly?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think we still have to work out the details internally, what that looks like, how we would open it up, how we would do the off cycle.
What if you come in an off cycle with a 2-year grant?
The goal would be to really align it with the biennium.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we don't want to have funds carrying over into different bienniums. And so that would have to be taken into account in the cycle.
I think Jenny alluded to it, but it's a lot of work on staff to carry over into a biennium. And we never saw that in years past, but we've seen it recently because the off-cycle grant program that we decided to do. And then in addition to that, the pandemic, but we're trying to get away from that. And I think it was even something that Director Tubbs at the time had suggested a long time ago, just go to a 2-year cycle. And that way we'll have to do less amendments and extensions. And sometimes in the past, I kind of learned my lesson when folks wanted an extension. They said, oh, only 3 months. And then I'd have to do another one and so I said, no, we're going to extend everyone until May. And wrap it up because the following, so give them an additional 11 months. The reason why we gave them 11 months is because there's a lot of extra work we have to do to close out that current non-extended grant program. And so we just had everything. So like, let's say today it's fiscal year 2024. All the 23 grants that have been extended will be wrapping up in May, so that then we can start the wrap up of the 2024 grants from May to June. So.
Okay. I think
I could create like a calendar.
I think
like, so people can better understand.
Yeah, because and I was going to add this, is that your communication out to all those entities, all the alphabet soup of people that you send your notices to, you should feel assured that it gets back to, at least in my case, I receive emails from at least 3 or 4 individuals who receive it from their respective professional organization. I get planners, I get our grant administrator, I get a county commissioner, some folks from our historic preservation office even sending me information about the grant.
I'm glad to know that.
So,
and then the other thing I would just add is with the changes and not requiring a grant review subcommittee from the council, one of the things that as we're reforming this council, we want to talk about is exactly what the council's role looks like in helping us shape the new goals under the grant program itself. So the start of the conversation. Yeah, Lee.
I have a question about the funding component of that then. Are our grants going to be either more in number or more substantial in funding? If we're on a 2-year cycle where now we budget for annual, what happens with the funds on that off year? Do we save it and roll it forward so we have a larger pool for the following year on that 2-year cycle? Or
that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think financially what we would probably see is either more grants or larger grants planning for the 2-year cycle. Our legislative appropriation for those grant funds is only for the biennium. And so, sort of while the funds themselves stay in our account, we would have to go back and ask for legislative authority to continue to spend those funds. But having a 2-year period to spend them could mean that there could be more funds. And, instead of budgeting $250,000 or whatever a year, budgeting $500,000 up front, either funding more or larger.
And once we have all the documents vetted, there'll be a big rollout of training and what that means moving forward, which would be supplemented with okay, how do you plan a 2-year project now?
Right.
Training.
Yep.
So many of them, I can bring the statistics, but so many of them are 2-year programs. Even in a normal grant year, let's say they get started a week or 2 late, it's the 4th of July, because let's just count the first 2 weeks of July gone. And then we expect everything to be delivered by mid-June so that we can do our QA/QC to make sure everything that's been delivered is there. So it's like they're almost already at a loss of, it's not a full year to begin with.
Alan?
Yeah, Jenny, hey, I really, really like these changes that we've made. I think these are awesome to go forward with. And it's just me that's confused. The annual plan that we have now is the plan we will go forward with. Is it to be reviewed in September? I was trying to read in the notes there, or every 3 years? I was confused on that.
I think we're required to review it every year. A goal would be to do a review. We are required to review it only every 3 years, but I think our intent would be to review it more frequently than that.
Okay, because it looks like it was spelled out there that in September, that would be the date. Is that correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay, yeah, good work on these. I think this is going to make it so much nicer for the council.
Oh, good. Thanks, Alan. Other questions or discussion about the administrative rules? So as I said, these rules have been adopted by the commission at this point. And then just finally, I just briefly wanted to note that also during the legislative session, the state library received legislative authority to begin to collect subscription fees to administer the statewide reference network, the real-time network. And so the commission also adopted administrative rules to define the process through which we will collect those subscription fees, the process for determining what that rate is going to be. The rules also allow for us to have some contributor agreements. So if we have partners that are, for example, contributing and maintaining the base stations for the real-time network, we can account for that in the subscription process. And then also in the administrative rules, any person or entity that is using the real-time network for educational purposes can have a subscription at no cost for use for those educational purposes. So those rules were proposed and adopted by the State Library Commission and have now gone into effect as well. It's noon, so I think we should go ahead and take a break for lunch. For those of you online, let's plan to reconvene about 12:45. And for those of you here, we do have lunch available for you.
Should we disconnect or should we just stay on, do you think?
Oh, they didn't.
Mics are unmuted. We're gonna start the meeting.
Do you think they heard us online?
For those of you online, we're going to go ahead and reconvene the meeting. All right, we have a number of topics we want to cover here this afternoon, starting with the council bylaws. Under our old council, we had what were referred to as operating guidelines that essentially served as our bylaws. Those were reviewed once, maybe twice, since they were first enacted in about 2006. So they really do need a substantial review. I would like to align them more with some of the bylaws that we have for the State Library Commission and our other advisory council if we can. My request is that one or two of you volunteer to review those with me as we go ahead and update them. The bylaws should really serve as the document that sets forth the norms through which this council operates. So things like the frequency of meetings, the nature of the agenda, what constitutes a quorum, and that kind of thing. So if one or two of you are willing to look at that with me, I would appreciate that. My hope is to bring back a draft to this council for adoption at your next meeting. So we have some bylaws that we're operating under. And then included in the bylaws, I'd like to have a stated review frequency, maybe every other year or something like that. So ping me or I will twist arms for a volunteer if you're willing to help me.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Are they already written? They just need reviewed?
They are online. They and maybe Genevieve can drop a link into the chat. I would say they need a pretty substantial rewrite. The operating guidelines give us a pretty good place to start from. And then, like I said, the State Library Commission has their own bylaws too. So we have a couple of documents that we can draw upon. So it's not like we're starting from scratch, but I think the operating guidelines themselves probably need a pretty substantial rewrite.
I'd be willing to help with that.
Great. Thanks, Maureen. Good.
It's the one that was right there that she just had up on the screen, the operating procedures.
Operating procedures, exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I can give you another round of eyes if you want
Great.
as well.
Thanks, Eric.
Sure.
I think between the three of us, we should be able to get that done in the next 2 months. Good. Thanks for your support. And then the other, the next item we wanted to talk about was just the council's review of the current grant application process that Aaron has talked about. As I said, we've done away with the requirement to have a grant review subcommittee, but we really want to hear feedback from you about what you think an appropriate role for the council would be in helping us to review the current grant applications as they're coming in, and then setting forward what the grant cycles look like in the future. So some of you have served on grant review committees in the past and may have some thoughts that you want to share as well.
You're looking for people to be on a review program.
May I?
Yeah, please.
I think what we're like, I guess we will be saying this a lot. What our hope is, because of the size of the council being reduced by 50%, and then just things changing so drastically, is we want to kind of reinvent the way we do things. And so it's right now it's open.
Mm-hmm.
We could figure out something for this year and then spend time thinking about next year. I can go over briefly, what the expectations would be. But and I know Jenny touched on this in the legislative update, but there was a requirement in rule about how many people you actually had to have on we never met that because that's a big burden on the council. So it was like, not only were you a volunteer on the council, then you were a volunteer on these specific groups. And we want good representation. And obviously we want the council's feedback. So I would say we're open to discussion, to hearing how you as the council feel like your role should be. And again, if it's a rebuilding year. If we want to maintain somewhat of a status quo, we just don't have the numbers like we used to. So.
And I think our hope for today is to get an idea of what we want to do for this current open grant cycle. And then, like Erin said, over the course of the next several meetings, put forward a more formal process that will follow in future years.
And why don't I just give you a high level of what we used to do for those of you that are new to the to the council. So we had a subcommittee and we tried to meet the expectation of what was laid out in rule. And typically it was probably 5 to 6 folks. We asked for one person to be the chair to kind of help run meetings and give direction. And then my job was to make sure when the applications were submitted that they were ready to be reviewed by the council. And there are procedures. We have a code of ethics statement. We have procedures for scoring. We have a review, a period of review. It's usually 3 to 4 weeks. And then an in-person review scoring meeting. Certainly over the years that's gone to virtual. And then you also have the group had given feedback on the actual application questions and in the past, but clearly that time has passed, and I'm pretty comfortable with the way the application went out. So I'm not too concerned about that. But so it would be starting February 29th, when about a week or so after, that's when we'd start asking for reviews. And so you get a good understanding of the number of grants. This past year, I do believe we had like 12 submitted, maybe 13, and 8 were awarded. And I think we had 2 half-day meetings for actual scoring, but then a bunch of meetings between now and the scoring date just to kind of go over the grant process and what was expected and review the scoring procedures. And the dates are no longer in rule. Mm-hmm. So the next meeting, we'll talk about that, is we're going to propose March, I think it's Tuesday, March 19th. Mm-hmm. So we'd need to have a meeting, I think it's May 9th. We'd need to make sure to factor in the grant program in our meetings to make sure that the council endorses those, and then they can go on to the commission for approval.
For those of you who have served on the grant review subcommittee in the past, I'm interested, again, we can think about what this looks like going forward. I'm really interested in knowing what you think has worked well about the process, what you think can be improved, and wanting to ensure that, at least for this year, that we're giving a good, thorough review of those applications. So I don't know, and if anybody has any feedback about the process and how it's worked, that might help the discussion as well.
Jenny, this is Alan. I'll just pipe up and say I don't see a need for a huge revision in the process. I think where the committee stumbled, perhaps maybe in a small amount, was maybe just how well some of the grants fit the land plan. They are kind of loose in it, it's not always, a one-to-one relationship where you can actually say it actually fits something, but it usually could squirrel under something in the land plan. But I don't know how we could streamline it any better. I mean, the individual grant committee members would review on their own. We would get together and we would go through how we reviewed, and we would maybe change scores based upon what somebody saw that another person didn't see. And through that process, you know, we came up with a final amount. And I can't think of a lot that we could streamline on it. I think that amount of work still needs to be done each time. Everyone's going to have eyes on each grant, have to score them independently. And then we're going to have to get together and hash out what we saw in each grant, and did it fit the plan? Does it not? And there was a time when we had the planning grants available. You know, I think where we struggled was just, you know, that AMPLA fund was kind of a stumbling block, that we don't have that anymore. But what we did last year, which was just our own scoring, I thought went really well.
That's really helpful feedback, Alan. Thanks.
Yeah, and I'll pipe up. Last year was my first time being on that review, and I would, I guess, echo Alan's comments. I'm glad he piped in, because I know myself and he were on that last year. And like you said, it was almost treating it just like an RFP type of review. We read them, we did our individual scores, and then we met and hashed out what differences we may have seen, and ended up coming to that consensus. Here's our top 8 or however, and that's how it came about. And so I don't know if that's the same type of process that you're envisioning with this round, with a number of volunteers from the council to sit in, or if you're thinking of doing it as in-house staff reviewed it first and scored, or what. You know, I'm if you want to do it, I'm more than happy to sit on a review again this time around. I actually enjoyed it last time. It was you know, reading some of the grants was pretty interesting. So
good. One of the questions I have is whether or not we should just have this be a requirement of the full council. You know, I know there's a workload there. I do think it gives the council one of the clearest windows into the impact of the work of the council and the funding, and how the grants then feed into and help us to accomplish the goals that we set forward for ourselves.
Yeah, I think the workload besides the grant committee, it's pretty low for this council. There's not a whole lot of stuff to do generally for everybody. So I think for everybody to review them would be appropriate and fun. I mean, it's the best thing I've done on the council, I feel like.
Oh, good.
And then, of course, if you're submitting a grant, we have a workflow for that. So don't be concerned. That's happened in the past. It's quite all right. We know how to approach that. So don't let that prevent you from submitting a grant.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts or feedback for us?
Jenny, it's Alan. Just thinking, if we had the whole council involved, I personally, I think that might drag it out a little long, because everyone is going to, you know, have to weigh in on their review of the numbers and the totals. I would say you'd probably be better off to have a collection of maybe 4, maybe 5 members volunteer, you know, as long as you didn't have anyone from any same agencies, and perhaps even, you know, maybe it's based upon does any member have an ethics violation and would have to abstain from voting on any of these? And if he did, then perhaps replace that person with someone else. But I would hate to see it, you know, drag among all of us as a committee. I just think that might be too many.
What about the bylaw? I know bylaws need to be rewritten, but if we have a full council, is that considered a business meeting?
It would be a quorum with the business meeting if it was the full council. Yep.
And then the meetings have to be recorded.
Yeah, we would. You can use your mics.
And then the question is be whether for privacy, whether you need executive session or whether you felt they could be public.
We could ask that every, maybe meeting in the middle is everyone's required every year. Like
Mhm.
at least
Mhm.
once out of their term.
Yeah.
Like the first, of their first year
I
of
kind
their
of like
term.
that idea. And we don't have to make that decision today, but
No, yeah.
you know, for those of you online, if you didn't hear Aaron suggesting that maybe at least once in a council member's term, they serve on a committee that would be responsible for reviewing the grants. Okay. Well, let's do this. We have 11 members, so let's ask for maybe 4 to 5 volunteers for this year for the FY25 cycle to work with Aaron. I've heard Eric and Valentine. I don't know if Alan, if you were volunteering as well. And then maybe a couple of others of you. And we'll continue with the process we've used in the past of having that group review and score and make their recommendations back to this council. And then at a subsequent meeting this year, we can more formalize some of the other requirements that we might like to see for the process going forward. How does that sound?
When does the review period start?
So we are closing applications on February 29th. And so there's a process where the application period, once it closes, once a grant is submitted, we'll start the process of getting it signed. And I can go into that with the subgroup. But so there's some internal work that we'll have to do. And in the past, I always offered it to give you them as they came in and you could score as long as our scoring criteria was 100% set. Give you them as they came in or give them to you as a group. And typically, I think everyone chose just wait and give it to us as a group of grants. And so I would say that it would be the month of March would be the review time. And but we have key dates to talk about here. So without having the council meet, our key date for rule is the council has to make a decision by May 1st. And then the commission has to make a decision by the 15th. And so, let's look at that. Yeah. So we'd want to, and typically in the past, we've seen the need for the commission to have an extra
kind of a special meeting.
And the other point of not having council meeting at the in coordination with Big Sky GeoCon is because it's a lot of administrative work for us to be prepared for that conference and then also be prepared for a council meeting and grants. And so it makes it kind of a very difficult time. And so if we could have the meeting potentially after that, and it wouldn't have to be long, it would just be to finalize what the subcommittee would be recommending. But also keeping in line with the requirements of rule. Yeah. So technically March and maybe part of April, first part of April. Grants are 10 to maybe 15 pages typically, and maybe at the most 20. We haven't seen those numbers in a very long time.
I thought that last round had page limits even.
They do. Yeah. The scope can be 4 pages.
Yeah.
The budget is 2 and those others. So yeah, depending.
Okay. Well, this is helpful. And Aaron, why don't you plan to reach out to the council as we get closer to the scoring process?
Sorry, I will be, if you don't fill it, I have 2 conflicts. One, I know that I'm pretty sure that one of my peers at the city is going to be applying. So if that,
Okay. Yeah.
if I would have to recuse myself for at least a portion of it. So
Okay.
and timeline and stuff, alternate, but it's one thing that I haven't done yet, and I know I want to and need to. So at some point I need to do it. I don't know if this is the year or not.
Sounds good, Lee.
I'll count you in for strategic planning then still.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. One of our action items for today's agenda is to appoint a council representative to the MAGIP Board of Directors. As you've heard, this is a really important partnership for us, and we're really pleased that MAGIP makes a seat on their governing board available for a council member to serve. It's a really important part of the bridge of communication that exists between our bodies. As you've heard, we have a GIS professionals rep in Eric on this council. And so we're very glad to have the opportunity to appoint someone from this council to serve on MAGIP's board. This is an action item, so I would seek a nomination from the council for a member of the council to serve in this position. And Aaron or Mike or Jeff, if Jeff is still with us, maybe you could provide a little information about the frequency of meetings of the board and what that work looks like.
Sure. The frequency of meetings is monthly basis. We generally have a meeting on the third Tuesday of every month, usually around 2 o'clock in the afternoon. There are quarterly in-person meetings. So we just met in Bozeman, had an in-person meeting, and we'll have our next in-person meeting at the Big Sky GeoCon. There's also a strategic planning retreat that happens every fall. And that's usually like just one of the, like a couple weekdays in September or early October. Anyway, this position would just be the kind of liaison, passing information back and forth between both organizations. So.
Thanks, Jeff.
I put the link, or not the link, excuse me, the piece of bylaws from the MAGIP bylaws that describes this council position that sits on the executive board of directors. And I know that at the last board meeting, the MAGIP board meeting I attended, there was discussion of updating this. So just so you all know, that will be updated with the next election, the bylaws. So they're working on getting the terminology to match.
Any questions from anyone on the council about this position?
We've never discussed this, but would the council, could we budget for travel?
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, if it is, we want to make sure that's known.
Yep. Yeah, they'd be representing the council, so serving on as under laws, they're eligible for funding when they're serving in the capacity as a council member. Absolutely. Yep. Okay. Does someone want to make a nomination or self-nominate for this position?
Yeah, this is Eric. I'm happy to continue or be in that role. I enjoy the interaction between this group and with the MAGIP group. So, so I guess in a self-serving way, I'll self-nominate. So,
Thank you, Eric. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, all in favor of Eric serving as the council representative to the MAGIP board, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Thank you all, and Eric, thank you. The next agenda item are some proposed meeting dates for this council for the coming year. Aaron and I talked quite a bit about this, and we do want your input. Typically, our typical meeting cadence would be quarterly meetings, or roughly quarterly, at least 4 times a year. Occasionally, we'll have special meetings to take action on business items that don't necessarily fall within our regular meeting agendas. And then there are special meetings of committees, for example, to do committee work. This is, as we've said, sort of a rebuilding year. And so we feel like it's necessary to meet a little bit more frequently, at least for this year, to do things like take action on bylaws and to review some of the policies and procedures of the council. So right now, we've suggested meeting maybe every other month, probably for shorter meetings. I don't think we need to have full day meetings or lengthier meetings, but at least meet for 2 to 3 hours every other month to take care of business and to help us get through some of the rebuilding items that we have. I'll just throw out the idea that Aaron raised to potentially do some kind of retreat. Maybe a 2-day retreat to sort of get to know one another and to take care of some of those business items in sort of one shot, or as close to one shot as we can. Might be a little challenging to find some dates for a retreat, but that's an idea as well. So wanted to throw out some options for you to talk about.
And the cadence I chose is just I think it's whatever Outlook gave me, the second Thursday, something like that, close to that, until January. And I like having a meeting in January. We haven't, as a council, had a meeting in January in a long, long time. And we kind of aligned to the Big Sky GeoCon and also the grant program. But I think it gives us a kind of a way to set the tone for the year. And also with legislative session, it might be really helpful to continue having a meeting in January. The only date that really doesn't work, after just taking a look at the council's rule deadline, would be the May 9th. So we'd probably have to switch that to April, particularly after the conference.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Preferences on schedules or frequency of meetings?
I think that the little bit of an increase in frequency is a good idea, especially in this rebuilding years. Try and get us a little more continuity there. It's definitely support that. And I think the idea of a retreat is would be really great. I know that when we implemented that with the Maggot board, it made a big difference in business, and it was a really good thing. So I'd support that too.
I think another thing we could consider, Jenny, is maybe just pick the first 2 dates and then look at everybody go back and examine calendars, come back with a few dates for a retreat, and we could finish the calendar in March.
Yep.
If people need more time. Do you have any okay.
For the April to fall after Big Sky, we'd be looking at if it was a state on the Thursday, it'd be April 25th.
Okay.
I know I am not available on the 25th.
Then it's just anywhere from the 22nd to the 26th.
Mm-hmm.
Or the following week is the 29th and the 30th. A handful of dates.
I do have a tribal conference, but I can always call them for a meeting, because I don't think it needs to be a long one.
If it's just
taking action
on the grants.
Would it be online or in person?
online.
Online. Okay, so it'd be a Zoom meeting
Yeah.
in the last week of April.
So tentatively a meeting on March 19th that would be a 2 to 3 hour business meeting. We would look at things like the bylaws and probably some of our data governance goals, and then have a short meeting to take action on our grant recommendations that week of April 23rd.
So the week of the
20
22nd, so we could say like Wednesdays is the 24th, April 24th.
March 19 is spring break for us. I'm not sure if it's in Helena too.
No, it's the
Ours
next
is
week,
The next week, yeah.
which overlaps Nizjik. Is the NAC, what, do you know when the NAC is in it?
They're not in April, right?
Okay. Yep. 24th or 5th works. That whole week won't work for me.
I am not available. The is Evan online? It's the 20, I'm not available the 24th or 25th or the 25th and 26th, and I can't remember which.
The Morals Conference is during that time too. It's I think it's the 20th to the 22nd.
The Marls conference is in March.
I
Right.
think
Yeah, I
March.
mean, that overlays with your March meeting.
Oh, right.
Starts the day after.
Yeah. Yeah. Evan is online.
Yes, I am here.
That training that we have, Evan, I can't remember if it's the 25th, April 25th and 26th or the 24th and 25th. No, apparently not.
It's the 4th and 5th. It's on
20 April 24th and 25th.
Okay.
We could do the 23rd.
The 23rd, April 23rd.
Yeah. And again, that will be a very short meeting. Online, virtual.
Yep. Does anybody have a conflict with March 19th? Valentine does. You would not be able to make that meeting. Okay.
March 19th is also a maggot board meeting date too.
Okay.
You had some conflicts.
About March 13th or 14th. We have a NAC on Monday, but or 15th.
Hey, do we use a scheduling poll or anything like that by chance?
We can use Doodle.
Yeah, we can use Doodle.
Yeah.
I can send out, sorry, I
That-
can send out a doodle or, like I'll send a form and I can do just that, the March 13th, 14th, 15th and see how that, or actually I can do the 12th too, 12th through the 15th of March and see what works best for everyone.
At the Broad Valley Spring
Mhm.
Federation.
Yeah. I can work around that probably. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and do that then. With the goal of finding a time in March for a 2 to 3 hour meeting and then a short, probably no more than 1 hour meeting in April.
Okay.
And then at your March meeting, we'll see if we can solidify the dates for the rest of the year and have those on more of a cadence.
Maybe the 13th. Maybe the 13th won't work. Won't work? Or it will for us. March 13th. Yeah.
But not the other dates.
I don't know. Anyway.
Okay, we can,
Okay,
figure it
yeah.
out. Okay.
Okay. All right. Erin, did you want to talk a little bit more about the geocon and the idea of the council panel?
Yes, thank you. So as I had discussed earlier, having the council meeting at the Big Sky GeoCon conference was really a way for us to get a lot of involvement from the community. But just over the years, we just hadn't seen a lot of folks be able to attend or interest. And so in addition, instead of us hosting a business meeting, we thought it might be interesting for us to do a panel session, like a 1 hour panel, and basically have the community meet the council members and then ask questions and maybe give like a high level of, this is what the council is here for. These are obviously it's a rebuilding year. We'll have 2 meetings. We'll have this meeting and the working session after, and then a March meeting to discuss this further and, further line out the, what the agenda will look like. I'm hoping, we have a lot of presentations going on, so I'm thinking, I don't know how many you folks have already committed to, so I'm hoping we can all squeeze in and wouldn't have too many overlaps, but I think it could be interesting. I would love for the whole council to be there, but of course, we understand people might not be planning on attending that conference, so I figured kind of like it would look like your normal panel discussion. We could even think of what we want to communicate and make sure that we're supplying people with questions to ask us if needed, or just to kind of start the discussion. And I did speak with Gail Jorgensen on Tuesday, and the conference planning committee knows that we're interested in doing a 1-hour panel.
I have a conversations with the council. What do people want to know about the council? What do we think is important about the work of the council that we want to make sure that the wider GIS community is aware of?
And hopefully maybe drum up interest for future council appointments.
Yep. Folks think that's a good idea, and do you think you'd be willing and able to participate? No.
It's a good idea.
Okay.
I will be able to participate. Be
Greatly.
willing. I think we should also bill it as a little bit of a opportunity because we're always looking for that engagement piece. How do we hear from them?
Yep.
Not just us telling them who and what we are, though I think that's very important right now. So maybe a little bit of a two-way on that.
Good. Yep.
This is Maureen. I will be there.
Great. Very good.
This is Karen. I personally cannot make the Makeup conference this year, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I think it's pretty important to have the state representative at such an event, and so I'm definitely going to take this back to Brian, and I imagine he'll probably want to be involved.
Good. Thanks, Karen. I had a thumbs up from Eric. Alan, do you know if you plan to attend MAGIP?
Yes, I will be there. I'd be pretty lame if I missed it in my own town.
Fair, very fair. And Brian, I know this might be something new for you, so something for us to talk about. I would say too, if you're there in the capacity as a council member, again, we have funding to help with costs.
And when was that again?
April 15th to the 18th
In Billings.
in Billings.
And right now we're looking at it will either be the 17th or 18th. Those are the 2 days. The first 2 days are workshops. And so the 17th and 18th would be one of those. So we'll try to get that scheduled as quickly as we can.
Okay. Yeah. Right now, I don't have any conflicts. I'd be happy to be there and help out where I can.
Great. Awesome. Well, we'll work out an outline for that session and then be able to talk about it more at your March meeting. Okay. And then Aaron mentioned that NSGIC, the National States Geographic Information Council, has their mid-year meeting in Arlington, Virginia, March 25th to the 28th. That is another meeting where we would love to invite at least one council member to go with us. Aaron and I will be there. I think Evan Hammer's planning to join us as well. And this particular event it's being held in Washington with the intent that we have an opportunity to visit our congressional delegations. We're working on creating those kinds of appointments, talking to them about the importance of our work and the data that we provide. So if you have interest and are available to join us, please let Aaron know as soon as possible so that we can coordinate the registration and travel arrangements.
I'll look at the budget, but I'm pretty sure I'll have enough to send at least 2 people. So I'll eventually have to give you a deadline. Well, maybe not.
Yes.
Any, yes. Like, I don't want to send you a week before.
Yep.
But yeah, it would be good to know. And it's a great group to coordinate with. And like I said, you will have your hopefully there'll be some fellow council members there from other states, and should be a good one. And I will say in the past, Montana's sent at times has sent outnumbered other states in delegations. So I'd like to get back there, please.
Yeah.
Hey, along that line, so that the my.nsgic,
Mhm.
that's a,
That's
I
their
think
community.
that's their community. And because I mean, I regularly get the emails,
Mhm.
I think because you've signed all of us up
Right.
as members. So
Right.
is that, I'm gonna have to go, as soon as I wrote that down, I started thinking, because I had a vague memory that I had to sign up for something, that I had to put in a username or something to that account. And
Yep.
is that something that I'd have to go through you guys, or can I reset something, or
You can reset with NISJIC.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think I changed your status, so you're probably still an active member.
Okay.
So we'll work together to get those updated, especially with the new council member.
Okay, yeah, because I get the weekly digest emails and actually some chat emails.
Yeah.
That come in on a regular basis, it seems like. And so, and there was the one time I wanted to follow up on that, on a specific chat, and it said something, but you have to sign in. And I was just like, ah. And so I just, okay, maybe
Yeah.
later. So, okay.
I think it's automated through the system, but if try to reset it, and then if you can't, let me know, and
Okay.
I'll send you to the right contact.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I read some of their things, and I do agree. I think it'd be, kind of interesting to get involved at that national level, and then see where we fit, with the state, but then on our local side of things and how it feeds into that national level. I think it's actually quite fascinating. So I'm trying to make it more of a commitment to pay attention to those emails when they come in. So
Good.
So I've appreciated having that opportunity with that. So we'll see what my travel plans are
Sounds good.
come March.
There's golfing nearby.
I was gonna say. All right. The last new business item that we wanted to talk about today was referring back to our strategic plan, goal 3, the development of the policies and best practices for GIS data.
Right. I just have to pull up the correct document. It's almost like I should have printed it off because it's so huge. I don't know how it's going to look on a screen. I wanted to introduce the topic and start the discussion, and I guess get your initial that's okay feedback on what we had started. So share. Oh, can you see that? You can't see that, can? Yeah, no. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So we had so Troy Blanford, Michael Fashaway, Evan, Jenny, myself, and Lee had worked through with our consultant AppGeo in developing this business plan. And so I wanted to introduce the topic today so that we could start the conversation and maybe dive in a little deeper in March on this matter. And so basically, this is the workflow that we have created and what we're going to propose using for the council and the greater for the council to adopt best practices and standards, for the state to adopt best practices and standards, for the MSL, for folks, ways to have folks introduce topics or ask us to review geospatial best practices and standards. And so the business plan is online, and I'm gonna follow up so everyone will have access to it and send it to everyone. But I was thinking that perhaps a small group potentially could continue this conversation offline to see, you know, do we want to have the council endorse the business plan? How do we want to move forward? And so basically, just gonna go through this. I don't know if I can zoom in. Oh, I can. Great. Except it doesn't. Okay. All right. So basically what we had established as a group is that there would be some sort of identified need for a standard. And that standard would come into the office or to the council. And we would review that standard and what was being requested. So it could come in as an idea. Hey, we need a standard, or it could come in as a standard that's already been developed. So like the NENA standard that's the National Emergency Number Association. And that is a standard that we have adopted for next gen work. Or there could be some sort of standard, for example, ArcGIS Online best practices, something we decided to develop ourselves. And so we would take it through this workflow every time. And we would take a look at it internally and understand if we have the authority to create or adopt the standard. And there are going to be cases where maybe it's not something for us to create, but we certainly could vet and then vet and or approve or ask another entity to adopt that standard. And in state government specifically, it could fall under the office of the CIO or the office of the CDO. And so we would work through them if that was something that we thought would be best vetted through that department. It wouldn't take us out completely, but again, we would need their input there. So then moving forward, if we decided that it was not, sorry, how do I get rid of this thing? That silly little Zoom bar is in my way. The next step would be, it would be, if it came in fully developed and there was no need for a revision, we would kind of go down to the right, and I'm not going to show that quite yet. But we would, if it did need development or revision, we would bring it to the council for review. And that would require a process for the council to then take part in. So it would be creating that prototype standard, reviewing a prototype standard, and you know, depending upon how the standard was presented to us, seeking stakeholder community feedback and review. And so obviously MAGIP is important to us, and we wanted to call that out, that specific community out in this workflow. And then once the community approved the workflow, it would be, yeah. Yeah, I guess I'm referring to them as both. Yeah, yeah. So in that case, if once the we would probably review it, MSL, to see if it's MSL would review it initially and bring it to the council if we thought it was appropriate. Thank you. And then also there would probably be other times where someone could bring it to the council naturally, and it wouldn't have to be vetted through the MSL. Does that help? Sorry, I didn't mean to confuse you. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Okay, so then next would be to draft that standard development. Once it's gone through the council's prototyping, it goes to the greater community to be moved to a standard development draft. Then we would put it into a formal peer review. And so I think we'd probably want to develop that further, but depending upon the standard, we'd probably want to, I guess, associate that specific standard to whatever peer group was being, would be, make the most sense. If it's next gen, then the next gen committee or industry. And after a peer review would approve that draft standard, then the preliminary standard would be developed. MGAC would endorse it, and then it would become that final standard. Sorry. We would then internally, the MSL would adopt that standard. And then after that, seek out additional endorsements as appropriate. And then, which could be MEGIP, perhaps it could be Marl's, MAP, depending upon the standard itself. Again, seeking endorsement where appropriate, and then start the promulgation process. And so, you know, doing trainings about the standard, seminars, webinars, and making sure people understand it so that we can all be operating under that same standard. That is extremely high level.
So the endorsement from say the Marls, from the MEGIP, from the GIS community at large comes down there after it's been accepted versus go to Part B.
It would be right at the beginning stages. So there would be a working group that starts to draft a prototype.
Okay, so that's where you'd have some of those organizations. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That prototype would then be reviewed by the greater community.
Okay.
If
Okay.
the community approves it, if the community doesn't approve it, you can see these arrows saying, okay, we're going to go back to the drawing board.
Got it.
But let me go back here. So this is part A. In the middle, towards the middle bottom.
There, I see it.
Yeah, it's going to be proposed to the council. The council says, yeah, this is worth our time. We're going to put it towards a working group. The working group is going to review it and vet it properly. Then that prototype standard, once it looks like it's in a good place to be vetted by the community, we would send it to the community.
Yeah.
If they approved it, then yes, keep moving forward. If not, then go back to the drawing board.
Perfect. I must have missed that.
Yep.
For whatever
No,
reason.
no.
I mean, it's bold. It's
Yeah,
clear as
well,
the
it's kind of
page in front of me right
yeah,
there.
it's
So
we want it, you know, we're all designers in our own right.
so
It's like you need 5 screens.
I think I must have looked down to my page of paper here, and then when I looked back up, I must have missed that on that Part A. So Part A is in that Part A section is where where the Marls, MEGIP, MAPS, whomever is, you know, would be involved. And because after that, then by the time you get to the endorsement side, any of those organizations should be willing to endorse.
Because they've already had input into the creation.
Absolutely.
process,
And the peer review would be actually trying to implement the,
Gotcha.
like testing out an implementation.
Yep.
Or however we'd want to define that further.
Yeah. Jeff has his hand raised.
I just want to say, not as a Maggot member, but as a City of Billings IT professional, really support this type of stuff. We've been working towards standardization through the utility network process. Is it possible that the grant process that you all have, you could earn points if you're going to include these approved standards in whatever project that you're doing?
Yeah, actually it would be mandated. Yeah, we do reference a few standards that through the grant program, we've mandated. And really what we've seen, which is why it makes the grant program so productive and such a good program for MSL. And I've tried to tell this to other states, is that we lay the groundwork for GIS folks starting out. It's like, we want you to use the standard. There's never a question. It's not changing from one version to another. And we don't hold the standards. We're not extremely strict on the standard. We ask for the bare minimum. And, you know, there's a lot of times when local government need to add 15 other fields. When I go for it, we want, you know, these key attributes. And so obviously, this is a huge, this is a pillar of the MGIA, having standardized data. And this workflow creates a method for us to adopt standards. So this in itself is a standard.
Yeah. Alan.
Yeah, I was just going to comment on Jeff's remarks, yeah, you wouldn't get funded. I mean, if we had a standard and you didn't follow it at all, it's like, boom, you're out. Or, you know, you go back to them and say, hey, why don't you follow the standard we got adopted? And maybe they're like, oh, I didn't know it existed. But I think this is really appropriate for this council to work on. I mean, if this council doesn't do it, then who does? And standards, I deal with those all the time, data standards at the federal government, and they take decades to get done, and they shouldn't. But this is really good to put upon this this council. I think this is really appropriate and spot on for what this council should be kind of working towards. Did you have a few data themes in mind? Just curious as to what your top priorities were that you might want to throw into this matrix first.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Alan. Actually, I would love, and my partners at SOS agree, is to I would love to start with an addressing standard for state government. I would love to start that process. And so that's one that we would like to try to address. And I think another one would be imagery. I mean, there's so many different aspects of this, whether it's imagery storage or imagery processing or imagery data set to utilize. I think I would like to start with addressing and asking folks to use ours as the official addressing data layer for the state of Montana, and making it a standard and best practice throughout state government. That would be my first thought. I think I say it could be, but it makes the most sense to me. I think it's something that I think can relate well with people we might be working with. And there's so many uses of address data throughout state government, and there are a variety. I can't estimate how many sources, but there are so many different sources being utilized, you know, that are being paid for. So it's duplication of efforts with costs, and hopefully not staff time. I don't think anyone else is creating a geocoder, but I would say addressing. Oh yeah, Brian.
Brian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I would agree with addressing. I support that. It is a huge challenge, and there's so many different ways that it's being done. There's 911 addressing, there's physical addressing, and so I think, you know, having this workflow is fantastic. I fully support us, you know, maybe taking addressing first and running it through the workflow and seeing how the workflow works, and to see if we need to tweak anything. That way we can, you know, start to bring other items through there, and then set an expectation of how long it takes when people bring items before this workflow from beginning to end.
Those are great suggestions, Brian.
Valid point.
Really appreciate it. Any other initial thoughts, especially for our new council members? I just wanted to make it clear, statute gives us the authority to set standards, but we don't really have a stick to enforce those standards, except in cases where data is being developed through funding that we provide. So, you know, we're creating these kinds of standards, but there is no stick. There's a little bit of incentive through the grant program. That's one of the reasons why it's so important for us to make sure that when we develop standards, we're doing that in conjunction with the wider community of users, so that, as Eric said, there should then be endorsement and adoption by encouraging and some little bits of carrots, but the recognition that we're all doing this together to make sure that we're all playing from the same playbook.
I think we've done a really good job with our baby carrots.
Our baby
throughout
carrots,
the years,
yes.
and
Yeah.
no sticks, but
Yeah.
yeah.
And I hope the trust that the staff and the council have built over the years within the community. So, good. This is helpful, Lee.
One of the things I wanted to shed a little light on too is the thought of what that workload means for the library, the council, anybody. And I wanted to point out that when we were designing this, the intent is that it doesn't lie with just one person or one group. Is that how, very intentionally in there, how do we share that workload, bring a working group together? It's not just the council, not just state library, seeking out members of the community who are stakeholders for that specific type of workflow, or what it is we're going to implement standards. I'm not any good for anybody on an imagery standard, right? But addressing or some of the other things would be great. So I just wanted to shed some light on that and make sure that the council understands this is not intended to be a huge work burden on us, but it's also very intentionally not placing the full burden on MSL staff or the expectation for the community to only do this. It's really a partnership and a collaboration to push this through, and that this provides that structure for us to follow and to herd all the cats.
Yeah, good points, Lee. Thank you. Any other discussion? I really like Brian's suggestion of trying to bring forward an address standard. I'm looking at Michael Fashway across a very long room and seeing, maybe we're not at the point of actually adopting or endorsing an address standard in March, but at least sort of talking about what that process would look like in parallel with talking about adopting the standard.
I would also like to point out that there could be multiple standards for addressing. And the one I think would be a start would be the use of our geocoding service as an authoritative data source, not a NINA standard or anything like that. So just to clarify, that would be my idea.
Put some sideboards on what
exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Michael. Okay.
Step one.
I caution having too many standards. I mean, the whole idea was we were going to go with the NINA standard, or for next gen. And that was the standard that we were all supposed to go off of. But now if Montana is going to be setting up their own standards, I'm assuming they'll be coinciding with, but more specific to Montana. I obviously I'm not on the council or anything like that. I'm just stating an opinion, but I just think I don't know if that's going to be too much, or we already have the NINA standards they're like 3 books in already on. So I don't know. That's just my opinion on that.
I can't speak to what the NINA standard looks like, so that's on Michael. But I can guarantee you that every agency in state government is using some sort of address list to address off of, whether that's map or just send lists. And so I would say I'm highly favorable of the MSCI addressing data layer. Even if we were just to focus on geo-enabled elections and next gen, I think it's a valuable reason to have that standard and to make sure that we're all geocoding off of the same list. And that, I can tell you there are departments, and within their departments, there are divisions that have multiple address lists. And I think that is costly to state government. And even with the grant program, we started developing a standard where, or workflow, maybe not a standard yet, that any kind of address that would come in for one of the geo-enabled elections grants projects is that if having one standardized data set would be able to inform different workflows. So there are going to be times when elections is going to get an address before next gen, or an updated address before next gen. And there's times when next gen is going to get an address before elections. And the main point that we wanted to reiterate for those projects at the local government level is that the next gen address list, that was going to be the authoritative list, but different workflows could inform that data and improve upon that data. But we wanted to make sure that they weren't being duplicated, and duplication is extremely expensive, as we all know. Sorry, Michael.
So yeah, just to help follow up on that, I guess what I'm hearing is the standard's more than like just a defined schema. It's also, we're talking about like better defining sources of the data, uses of the data, workflows, processes, all that stuff that kind of feeds into it and helps bolster or make what right now is, simply a 911 centric standard into something more holistic and enterprise wide. I think that's what I'm hearing. And I think that gets to maybe your question.
And this is exactly the kind of discussion that could happen within that kind of work group that's then bringing back recommendations to the council.
Sorry, yeah, scroll so I can see the top. Just pay attention, pull your attention to the note that's here is, I don't want us to get so caught up on the word standard because that has some weight behind it, right? But this process is intended for workflow, best practices, governance, it gives us some structure, and something might not necessarily be deemed a standard, but a best practice. And so don't get caught up on just that word.
Good point. Other discussion? Okay. That was the last item on the agenda for our business meeting. Is there any public comment? Any public comment? All right, hearing none, we can adjourn our business meeting. Our agenda does say our next meeting would be March 19th, but please ignore that and we'll do a poll to find a better meeting date in March and April and then publicly announce those meetings. Does anybody need a short break? I do want to take us through a bit of an orientation, especially for the new council members.
Are we gonna record this or should we?
Let's do 2 separate recordings if we can.
Stop record, yeah.
I think I just did, but okay, we can be adjourned. Okay.
All right, so I'll stop this recording.